They say Seattle is a city of rain and secrets. I never understood that until this fall, when the gray skies matched my empty house, and loneliness became my constant companion. My husband David was living his dream, building his tech empire in Singapore, while I maintained our perfect life in Queen Anne. Our $3 million view of the Sound. Our smart home that responded to every command. Except make me feel less alone. I used to be somebody. Had my own marketing career in New York. Corner office and everything. But love makes you do stupid things. Like following a man across the country. Trading independence for security. A ring for a gilded cage. The moving truck next door broke my routine. Black and sleek against the morning fog. I watched from my home office window as he stepped out. Tall, in worn jeans and a gray sweater. Looking nothing like the tech brothers who filled our neighborhood. Jack Cooper, the new neighbor. I learned his name that afternoon, when he rang my doorbell, apologizing for the noise. His smile was different from David's. Warmer somehow. More present. I'm renovating the whole place, he said. Let me know if it gets too loud. I noticed his hands. Artist's hands, with calluses and character. So different from David's keyboard smooth fingers. I'm Sarah, I said, too quickly. Welcome to the neighborhood. He looked at me a moment too long, before thanking me and turning away. I watched him walk back, telling myself I wasn't watching. The first week was normal. Morning Zoom calls with clients. Afternoon yoga with Rachel. Evening FaceTime with David. But I kept hearing hammering next door. Kept seeing Jack in his yard. Working with his hands. Building something real. Rachel noticed first. During our Thursday wine night. You seem different, she said. Swirling her glass thoughtfully. More alive. I blamed it on my new workout routine. Another lie from my collection. The storm came on a Tuesday. Power lines down across the city. David called, worried about his precious smart home. But I barely heard him. Because I'd seen Jack outside. Securing loose shutters in the wind. Rain soaking his gray sweater. When my lights flickered and died. I wasn't scared. Just curious. About the knock that would come. About the neighbor who would check on me. About what happens in the dark. Jack brought candles and apologizes. For intruding. For caring. For making my heart race. We sat in my living room. Shadows dancing on walls. How do you like Seattle? He asked. But his eyes said something else. I told him about New York. About my old life. About the silence of success. He told me about his divorce. About rebuilding homes to rebuild himself. About the beauty in broken things. Hours passed like minutes. Until the power returned. Harsh light breaking our spell. I should go, he said. But didn't move. You should, I agreed. But didn't W. And him too. That night, I dreamed of artists' hands. And woke up guilty. David called during breakfast. Full of Singapore stories. 3 more months, he said. The merger needs me. I said I understood. Another lie. Jack was in his yard when I left for yoga. Shirtless in the autumn sun. Building a deck with his own hands. While my husband built empires with keyboards. The contrast wasn't lost on me. Rachel saw right through me. During our post-yoga coffee, "You're glowing," she said. "And it's not from downward dog." I changed the subject. But my cheeks burned. The next week brought more rain. More solitude. More moments at my office window, watching Jack work. Until he caught me looking. And waved. I waved back. Started a dangerous game. Morning coffee on my porch. Afternoon glimpses through windows. Evening walks that passed his house. Just happening to pass. Just happening to look. Just happening to hope. He caught me in the grocery store. Between wine and loneliness. "Cooking for one?" he asked. Looking at my basket. "David's still away," I said. Like that explained everything. "Come over," he said. "I'm making pasta." I should have said no. Should have remembered my vows. Should have been stronger. Instead, I said yes. His house was all potential. Half-finished walls and dreams. "I like seeing the bones," he said. The truth beneath the surface. We ate at his makeshift counter. Drinking wine from paper cups. Talking about everything. And nothing. His hand brushed mine, reaching for bread. Electricity shot through me. "Sorry," he said. Not looking sorry at all. I left too quickly after dinner. Fleeing the warmth of his kitchen. The warmth in his eyes. The warmth in my chest. David called that night. Talked about stock options. While I thought about paper cups. And artists' hands. The neighborhood started whispering. About the widow next door. About my new running route. About how often my lights stayed on late. I ignored them all. Lost in my own world. Of stolen glances. And almost touches. Until the night of the second storm. When everything changed. Lightning split the sky. Thunder shook the windows. And my doorbell rang. Jack stood there, soaking wet. "Power's out again," he said. But his eyes said more. I let him in. Because I couldn't not. Because I was tired of being alone. Because some storms you can't weather alone. We sat in candlelight again. But closer this time. The air heavy with words. We couldn't take back. "Sarah," he whispered. Just my name. But it held everything. "We can't," I said. Even as I leaned closer. "I know," he replied. His hand finding mine. The candle flickered between us. Casting shadows on his face. Making everything seem possible. And impossible. When his lips met mine. The storm outside disappeared. Replaced by a different kind of thunder. In my heart. In my soul. In my carefully constructed world. I pulled away first. Reality crashing back. "Oh God," I whispered. Standing too quickly. "I'm married." "I know," he said again. Standing too. Not touching me. But close enough. That I could feel his heat. "This can't happen," I said. But didn't move away. "It already has," he replied. And he was right. It had been happening for weeks. In every glance. Every almost touch. Every moment we pretended. We weren't falling. The candle burned low. Shadows growing longer. Making it easier to forget. Why this was wrong. His hand cupped my face. thumb tracing my cheekbone. "Tell me to stop," he whispered. I should have. Could have. Didn't. Instead, I kissed him again. Harder this time. With all the loneliness. All the want. All the wrong. His hands tangled in my hair. Mine gripped his shoulders. As we crossed lines. We couldn't uncross. The power came back suddenly. Harsh light flooding the room. Breaking our spell. Showing us our sins. I stepped back. Hand covering my mouth. "You should go," I said. Voice shaking. He nodded. Understanding everything. And nothing. When the door closed behind him, I slid to the floor. Touching my lips. Where I could still feel him. What had I done? What were we doing? What would happen now? The questions echoed. In my empty house. In my racing heart. In my shattered certainties. About who I was. What I wanted. Who I wanted to be. David called an hour later. "Miss you," he said. While I stared at myself. In the bathroom mirror. Looking for signs. Of my betrayal. Finding only questions. In my reflection's eyes. The next morning dawned gray and guilty. Seattle rain washing away everything. Except what I'd done. I avoided my office window. Couldn't bear to see him. Couldn't trust myself. But the house felt smaller somehow. Every room a reminder. Of candlelight and kisses. Of choices I couldn't take back. Rachel called, sensing something. Best friends always know. "Lunch?" she asked. Not really a question. We met at our usual place. Where she saw right through me. "Spill," she said. Over untouched salads. I told her everything. About the storms. About Jack. About my crumbling certainties. She listened without judgment. Until I finished. "What are you going to do?" The question I'd been avoiding. "Nothing," I said. It was a mistake. But my phone buzzed. Jack's name on the screen. Making me a liar again. His message was simple. "Can we talk?" 2 days of silence. Now this. Rachel saw my face change. "Be careful," she warned. Hearts aren't the only things that break. I waited until evening to reply. Nothing to talk about. But he was already at my door. Looking like everything I shouldn't want. 5 minutes, he said. I let him in. Because 5 minutes couldn't hurt. Because I was weak. Because I needed to know. He stood in my kitchen. Where David's coffee maker gleamed. Where my wed. ING photo hung. I can't stop thinking about you. The words hung between us. Heavy with possibility. Jack, I started. But he stepped closer. Tell me you don't feel this. His voice low. Dangerous. Tell me it's just me. I couldn't lie. Not about this. Not to him. It doesn't matter what I feel. But my body betrayed me. Leaning toward him. Like a flower seeking sun. His hands found my waist. Drawing me closer. Until there was no space. Between right and wrong. It matters, he whispered. Against my lips. Before kissing me again. Making me forget everything. Except this. This moment. This feeling. This beautiful mistake. We became careful after that. But also reckless. Stolen moments in his half-finished house. Long talks that turned to touches. Kisses that tasted like guilt. And freedom. David's calls became background noise to the symphony of my betrayal. His success stories fading against Jack's truths. The neighborhood watched, whispered, wondered, while we pretended everything was normal. Rachel worried. This will end badly, she said. Over wine and warnings. Someone always gets hurt. I knew she was right. But couldn't stop. Didn't want to stop. Jack was like oxygen. After years of holding my breath, his hands told stories. On my skin. In my hair. Against my heart. Stories of possibility. Of passion. Of everything I'd given up. For security. For success. For a life that fit on Instagram. But didn't fit me anymore. The affair bloomed like Seattle flowers. In rain and shadow. Hidden from light. But beautiful anyway. Until the message came. Coming home next week. David's words on my screen. Like a death sentence. For this secret life I'd built. I found Jack in his workshop. Sawdust in his hair. Plans on his table. Future in his eyes. David's coming back. The words tasted like ashes. He stilled. Then turned to me. What do you want? The question I'd been avoiding. Since that first storm. I don't know, I whispered. But it was another lie. I did know. I wanted him. His realness. His presence. His love that asked nothing. Except everything. Leave with me, he said. Simply. Like changing lives was simple. Like love was enough. I can't, I replied. Watching his heart break. In artist's hands. That had rebuilt me. While breaking me. He nodded once. Understanding everything. I'll always be next door. A promise. A torture. A possibility. I left his workshop. Walking through rain. Back to my perfect house. With its empty rooms. And hollow success. Preparing to become. Who I was supposed to be. Again. But his words echoed. In every step. What do you want? And for the first time. I really thought about it. About want. About need. About love. That builds. Instead of breaks. David would be home in 3 days. To his perfect wife. In his perfect house. Never knowing. How close I was. To choosing differently. To choosing more. To choosing love. Over security. Truth over appearance. Reality over dreams. The rain kept falling. Like Seattle tears. For what was. What could be. What might never be. While I stood at my window. Looking next door. At the light in his workshop. Where he built beautiful things. From broken pieces. Like he'd built me. From my broken pieces. Into someone who finally knew. Exactly what she wanted. The question was. Did I have the courage? To take it? David came home on a Thursday. Bringing Singapore gifts and stale kisses. while Seattle rain washed away the last traces of my other life. He didn't notice the changes in my eyes, in my heart, in our home. Too busy with his merger stories, his stock options, his empire building. While I thought about artists' hands and half-finished dreams, the neighborhood welcomed him back with dinner parties and false smiles. Everyone pretending they hadn't seen, hadn't whispered, hadn't known. Jack stayed away. His workshop dark, his house quiet, like my heart, until the night of the storm. Another Seattle storm, like the one that started everything. When David was working late, and my doorbell rang, I knew before opening who would be there. Rain-soaked and beautiful, breaking my heart again. I had to see you, Jack said, water dripping from his hair. Just once more. I should have closed the door. Should have been strong. Should have remembered my vows. Instead, I let him in. One last time. One last moment. One last chance. To be real. I'm dying without you, he whispered, his hands cupping my face. Like I was precious. Like I was everything. We can't, I said. But didn't move away. We already are, he replied. Before kissing me. With all the love. All the pain. All the truth. We'd been hiding. I kissed him back. Desperately. Completely. One last time. Until headlights swept across the windows. David's car in the driveway. Reality crashing back. Jack disappeared through the back door. While I straightened my clothes. Fixed my lipstick. Prepared my lies. But David knew. The moment he walked in. Saw it in my face. In the lingering warmth. In the guilt that filled the room. How long, he asked. Voice cold as Seattle rain. I couldn't lie anymore. Didn't want to. Since you were gone. The truth finally spoken. He nodded once. Like pieces clicking into place. The neighbor, he said. Not really a question. I watched his world shatter. In the reflection of our smart home screens. Where everything was perfect. And nothing was real. I'm sorry, I whispered. But wasn't really. Sorry for his pain. But not for finding myself. He left that night. Back to his Singapore empire. Leaving divorce papers. On our marble counter. The neighborhood exploded. With gossip and judgment. While I stood in my kitchen. Finally breathing. Rachel brought wine. And understanding. Are you okay? She asked. No, I said honestly. But I will be. Jack found me on my porch. The next evening. Looking at the sound. And all its possibilities. I heard, he said simply. Sitting beside me. Close enough to touch. Far enough to choose. What do you want? He asked again. The same question. But this time I knew. Everything, I answered. The real thing. The messy truth. The unfinished story. He smiled then. Taking my hand. As Seattle rain fell. Washing away the past. While we sat together. Planning to build. Something beautiful. From broken pieces. Months passed. Seasons changed. I moved next door, into his unfinished house, where we worked together, building walls, building trust, building love. The neighborhood still whispers about the scandal, about choices made, about love found in unexpected storms. But I don't hear them anymore. Too busy living, too busy loving, too busy being real. David's empire grew in Singapore skyscrapers, while I grew too, in a house built by artists' hands. Sometimes I think about that first storm, when loneliness led to lightning, and thunder brought truth, and rain washed away all my careful plans. They say Seattle is a city of rain and secrets, but I've learned it's more. It's a city of second chances, of real love, of beautiful things, built from broken pieces, by hands that know how to create, how to hold, how to love. And in the end, that's all that matters. The truth beneath the surface, the love behind the walls, the life beyond the perfect, the heart beyond the storm. End.